So first off, I want to say I suck at role playing.
ロボ忍者デザイン
I understand what I would think I would do in a given situation, but I have a really difficult time getting out of my own head and getting in the headspace of another character. Hey, it's your gamer guide Nate with Robo Ninja Design, and I'm going to talk today about these personality character sheets that I'm developing for tabletop role playing games. The idea is that in the upper right hand corner of the Dungeons and Dragons character sheet, there are some areas where you can fill out some stuff about your character's personality, and I'm exploding that onto a whole page. There will be some numeric areas where it'll be easy to understand the stats of a personality, and then some other areas like backstory and quirks and those types of things. The whole idea is that we're going to dive a lot deeper into the personality so that it can be much more fleshed out and kind of bring these characters to life, have them be three-dimensional. If you're interested in this, I want to really encourage you to subscribe, because this really is the primer episode. This is episode 0 of the series. There's going to be 19 total episodes, including this episode 0. And each week, I'm going to go over one of the personality types and put that into the sheet and then just talk about it in depth. Also in the comments below, there is a sheet that goes over the anatomy of the personality character sheet. It's a lot of what I'm talking about here. It's the breakdown of all the different sections. If you're enjoying this content, please let me know in the comments below what you think about it. Thanks for watching, and let's get into it. So I often find that new players will do one of two things when they start role-playing for the first time. One is they act as themselves, maybe a more heroic version, but basically they're saying, what would I do in this situation? And then they do that. The other is they just play someone who's completely deplorable the whole way through. They're stealing from the party, they're murdering people in the streets, they're just doing awful stuff all the time. It doesn't make any sense. And they are trying to test the boundaries, the moral boundaries of the system. I think once players get that kind of out of their system, they tend to move on to stock characters. So I want to be the jock, I want to be the himbo, I want to be the edgelord, I want to be the grumpy old man who's yelling at the kids to get off my lawn. And that's a good step, but all those characters fall flat because that's just an archetype. That's not a whole person with a life and a backstory that has meaningful impact as to who they are today. So this is a big driver as to why I'm trying to develop these personality character sheets so we can have a good reference as to how people would actually act in these situations. Now, so far, I've only talked about uses for player characters, but these sheets actually have uses that go far beyond that and can really be used for the dungeon master or the person running the game. Non-player characters. If you are unprepared, the party has somehow skipped ahead and you're not ready for them to meet a main NPC that is going to be important to the story going forward, pull a sheet out. That is that character's personality. You can always modify it later. Also, if you have non-player characters who are embedded in the party, who are around all the time or even go on quests with the players, definitely it would be nice to have some more information as to how these characters are going to act. Another aspect is villains. So a lot of times villains get a bad rap because it's really they are evil and they do evil things and that's what they do. And it doesn't make any sense. What are their motives? What caused them to be this way? And how are they relatable? There are people in our lives who do bad things, but it's for reasons. And if we can understand that, we can really make villains be a lot more than they are currently. And I think that when the game gets injected with that sort of naturalism or realism, you might say, it's going to add a depth and a richness to it that we aren't always currently experiencing. To back all the way up, 2 years ago, my brother reached out to me and said, hey, I did this personality test at work, and it's been very insightful and very informative. It's been very helpful. I think you should take it. I wasn't in the space at the time to want to pursue that. A year after that, which would have been a year ago, I came across a video on YouTube. It was some Hollywood scriptwriters, and they were talking about what they used as references to write great characters, and it turned out to be this Enneagram system. The Enneagram is just observational stuff. In fact, they don't even know where it came from. I guess some monks developed it a long time ago, and people have added to it over the years. I think it was 8 core personality types to start, and they've added a 9th one. The way it works is it starts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 is next to 1 in a circle, and then whatever, let's say you're a type 3. So then it's the question is, are you a type 3 wing 4 or a type 3 wing 2? So which of these personality types that are the neighbors are you going to kind of get some flavor onto your character? And so the way that breaks down is there are 18 total personalities. And I was really curious as to how I could insert this information into a format that would be super usable for D&D. And that's when I started researching, well, what are ways we can quantify these different aspects of personalities? And that's when I came across the Hexaco system, which is, it's also a personality-based test you can take. It's going to score you, I think it's 1 to 7 in these 6 different areas. And I was like, oh, 6 areas, that's great, because that's what D&D uses, so that'll feel really familiar. I'm talking about D&D for a lot of this, but this really could be used for any system where roleplay is part of the game. So Hexaco evolved from the Big Five, which used to spell out the acronym OCEAN. Then they got rid of narcissism because nobody wants to be called the narcissist. And they replaced that with the first part of Hexaco, which is honesty and humility. And then they also added in emotionality after that. Then extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness to new experience. So now, just to break down the different aspects of the Hexaco system, first up we have honesty and humility. So a high score in that would be not interested in wealth or luxury. They are not raised by status. So if they get knighted or they become proclaimed a local hero, they don't look down on people. They treat people all the same way they would want to be treated. It doesn't matter if it's a king or if it's a commoner, they're going to treat them with dignity and respect. And on the whole, they are generally a rules follower and a law-abiding citizen. The low end of the score, they will ignore rules and laws. They will gain at the expense of others, and they have a god complex. They think they're better than everybody else. So if this is kind of interesting that you might have a god complex, you could put that into a villain. Suddenly you have one aspect of a villain's personality that starts to make sense. So the second thing on the list is emotionality. And unlike the other aspects, we're typically seeing a lower score being more favored in this case. A high score is going to tend to have you overreact to situations, be very prone to negative emotions, and act in very unpredictable ways. A low score will have you be calm under pressure, resilient, meaning you can bounce back from negative situations, and a negative side effect may be that you come off as cold and aloof and uncaring. The third one is extroversion, and I feel like this has been talked about ad nauseum. Unless you live under a rock, you pretty much know what's going on here. High score in extroversion means you're going to be outgoing, talkative, you're going to be seen as confident and capable. That's just how people view you. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case. And you enjoy being the life of the party. You are energized by interacting with other people. A lower score means you will be more reflective, more observant, quiet, and more reserved. You may be a little socially awkward, and you are energized by being alone. Maybe this character enjoys meditation. The A in Hexaco stands for agreeableness. And this is kind of how much you want to get along with other people, how much you want to cooperate. So a high score looks like you're very empathetic, kind, and caring. You defer to the group for decisions. You want to reach a consensus. You want everyone to agree and get along. A negative side of a high score is that you may be easily manipulated. People might be able to get you to do things that aren't good for you because that's what they want, and you want what they want. A low score in agreeableness means that the character will be greedy, stingy, and also self-reliant. They will put themselves in front of others as far as what they want. and they will be very assertive at achieving those wants. The fifth aspect in this is conscientiousness. A high score in this will look like your character is careful, vigilant, and organized. They will act with duty and aim for achievement, meaning that if they have an oath or a promise, those oaths will be fulfilled and the promises will be kept. They have planned action, meaning that before they go on missions, they want to plan everything out. So they want to plan for everything that can go right and everything that can go wrong and just be prepared in general. A low score in this means that your character will be easygoing, but disorderly and a bit spontaneous. They may be unreliable, messy, and somewhat ineffective because they're unorganized. They will be quick to act and instinctive, but also compulsive. So as you see, this is a really good example of a super high end can suffer from analysis paralysis, where they can't get anything done because they're always planning. And a super low end can be they're always jumping into battle and getting themselves in trouble. I think either way can be fun, and you just got to find what suits you. So the final aspect is openness to experience. And this breaks down into 6 sub-aspects. The first one being imagination and fantasy. Are they very creative in their head? Do they have a rich inner life? Or not so much? The second one is aesthetically sensitive, which means are they interested in art? Do they care about beauty? Or do these things not interest them? Number 3 is attentive to inner feelings. And what this is, do they pay attention to the emotions that they're having, or do they just suppress that and move forward? Number 4 is adventurous. So is this a type of person who wants to go out and experience new things, or do they just want to stay at home like a hermit? It's going to be a little bit weird to play a character who is an adventurer who does not want to go, but also that might be super funny and interesting. The 5th one is intellectual curiosity. These are the type of people who really love to go to the museum, love to learn new things and hear new ideas, or are they a little bit less interested in all that stuff? And the last one is the likelihood to challenge authority. This just means that if something seems unjust or wrong in their eyes, it may be totally just. There may be cultural reasons for the way things are happening, but to them it just intrinsically feels wrong. They will step up to the plate and say, this is not right and this should be different. These will be scored from 1 to 9, with 1, 2, 3 being low scores, 4, 5, 6 being a mid score, and 7, 8, 9 being a high score. And on the sheets, you can always go plus or minus 1 to create a more dialed in feel for your character's personality. These scores could also change over time while your character develops. And although it is kind of unlikely for people to have massive changes in their personality, it could happen in the game. Now getting into some more of the flavor aspects of the sheet. Below the hexaco numbers, we have backstory beats. And typically, people of a certain personality type, it's tied to stuff that happened in their childhood a lot of times. So people with similar personalities had similar childhood experiences often. So I'm going to kind of pull those out of the Enneagram stuff and then slot them in here so they can be referenced for your backstories if you want to include that. This will kind of give a way to tie your backstory into how your character acts and have it be a meaningful part of the game beyond just things that you've accomplished and people you know. Next up, I've kind of taken flaws out of it because people didn't really understand what to do with that. It went from everything from I'm a full-blown addict who cannot function in society to I bite my nails. And the I bite my nails thing is kind of funny, but the full-on addict thing is like, A, do we even want that in the game? And then B, why? Like, what is the underlying reason why your character is dealing with this stuff? I've done away with that and broken a personality presentation down into 3 levels. The top tier is Paragon. This is when your character is living their best life. They are performing at their peak and feeling good generally. And that kind of will go through the different actions that we will expect to see when they're in this zone. Standard is just normal day-to-day. Things are going right, things are going wrong, stress is coming in, it's being dealt with. Some in healthy ways, some in unhealthy ways, but generally we're getting by. This is where your character will be probably for most of the time. And the bottom tier is deplorable. And this is when your character is just doing awful. And this is where I think there's a lot of good pull for villains to put them in this deplorable zone of how people will act if they are just stressed to the max. This whole Paragon Standard deplorable section of the game, I think characters should be able to move up and down that as they choose in response to what's going on around them. But also, I think that it gives a really interesting character arc for a character to be in that deplorable zone or standard zone and move up to Paragon and become a best version of themselves. Or a tragic story where things just get worse and worse and worse, and it's more of like a flat out spin or, a circling the drain type situation. So values are really, what does your character care about? What are they chasing? What do they want out of this world? Do they care a lot about other people's approval? Do they want to be world renowned? Do they want to be famous? Do they want to be rich? Do they care about intellectual gain? Do they want to gain more knowledge? Do they want to provide safety for their friends and family? What drives them? What's going to call them to action? So fears is kind of like the negative emotions that this personality will experience that will cause them to do things. And as I've gotten older, I've come to understand that negative emotions, even though they're labeled as negative, are not necessarily bad. They can be used as fuel to accomplish great things. And whether we like it or not, we are driven by anger and fear, but they cause us to do great things and some awful things too, depending upon what, where your character is at the time. But it is interesting and valuable to know about your character. Next, we have social, which is just to add some depth to the introversion and extroversion thing to kind of further explain it. Because you could have someone who's introverted but knows of a lot of people and does keep up with a lot of people. And you could have someone who is extroverted who keeps a very small, tight-knit group of friends and doesn't have a lot of friends. It's meant to kind of just dig down into that a little bit. Up next, we have quirks, and that's just meant to kind of cover interests that this personality may have, hobbies that they may be into, and then also kind of those contradictions that we all have in ourselves, which is part of the reason why I think we suffer, is because we are two ways, and those two ways don't always intermesh. So this is just meant to be quick notes for that and a little bit more depth. Lastly, we have class suggestions, and this is just meant to say, if your personality values these things, interacts with the world in this way, and is driven by these negative emotions, what is something that is likely they're going to devote their life to? My hope is that by using these sheets, we can all become better role players. And beyond that, that we could understand ourselves and others better, what makes us tick, what makes other people tick, how other people perceive and respond to the world, and how we perceive and respond to the world. We can play in a way that's more believable and relatable and nuanced. And that we can have character development that's tied to role playing. Woo! You made it all the way through the whole video. I want to thank you so much for your time and attention. Please subscribe if you want to see the rest of this series. Comment and let me know below what you think about all this. I want to thank Carl Casey at White Bat Audio for the music, and I will catch you in the next one.
ロボ忍者デザイン